Thank you for coming. We are again in the similar topic, again about, again we are going to talk about response biases in non-cognitive data on the basis of PIAAC. So just a short introduction. We all know that self-reports, questionnaire data surveys, they're all pretty much synonyms, are used widely around social sciences in many of the areas, sub-areas. This is probably the dominant method of data collection, of study. And it also constitutes an important part of every or almost every large-scale assessment, including PIAAC. And we also know that even those large-scale assessments with all their very up-to-date methodology are not absolved, sadly, from the response biases, threats and dangers. And here is just a handful of references showing some different response biases, threats, dangers, imperfections in non-cognitive data of large-scale assessments. So response biases, maybe a short definition, we call a response bias a systematic tendency to answer to questionnaire items, a systematic tendency to answer on some other basis than the item's content. And we have different cases here, different kinds of response biases. I will concentrate on the first one on this short graph, on careless responding. So what is careless responding? Well, pretty much that's it. We define it as responding without sufficient error, sufficient effort, but with probably substantial error, without fully or partially understanding the instructions, without fully paying attention to items content. This is something similar to the satisficing concept, which also conveys idea of responding to questionnaire items without sufficient effort. There are multiple causes or believed causes for this kind of activity, for this kind of responding. It may be due to low interest, due to fatigue. An example, the questionnaire is too lengthy for our participant, due to low feeling of obligation that we should give our best in answering the survey questions, and also due to some environmental or psychological distractions. As we see, it has multiple causes, but it also has multiple consequences. At least it has multiple different observable patterns. And so some respondents just tend to yield pseudo-random responses. Some of them just give the same answer in every question, in every item. We sometimes call it straight lining, because their responses form a straight line in the questionnaire. And there are also some other ways of responding. But what they all have in common is that they yield somewhat meaningless responses that do not enable us to measure the trait that we were interested in measuring. And of course, this kind of responding constitutes a threat to validity of our measures, and it also can undermine some essential psychometric properties of our scales. Another problem is that the bulk of, because this is a topic that is intensively studied. I think its popularity is on the rise. But what we can observe is that the bulk of the studies concentrates on self-completion mode, and especially on web surveys. And there is much less evidence on careless responding in large-scale assessments and in assessments that use face-to-face mode. In example, what was used in the previous cycles of PIAAC. So let's take a look whether careless responding is also a problem in this mode and in studies like PIAAC. So we have concentrated on analyzing PIAAC background questionnaire data, especially from the age part of the questionnaire. The age part constitutes of 4 different scales, and they measure usage of reading, writing, numeracy, and ICT skills in everyday life. And altogether, these scales have the same format because they use a 5-point rating scale, and altogether they have 25 items. So we have gathered the data from all countries participating in the 3 PIAAC cycles, which gave us more than 200,000 participants. So it is a large sample, but we had to eliminate some of the participants. Have decided to eliminate the people that had all the age part missing. Of course, this data can be imputed, but if someone just skipped the whole part, we have decided to eliminate them on this stage, but it was only 1% of the whole sample, so probably not that big of a problem. I have used an R package to calculate 2 very widely used indices of careless responding. One of them is Mahalanobis distance, and the second one is called long string. So Mahalanobis distance measures the distance of a vector of responses of a given participant from the center of the data. So it can indicate that someone is an outlier, that someone has a very distinctive pattern of responses than people usually have in a given group, in a given assessment. And it is linked that people that have very high levels of this distance, meaning they are very far from what is typical in a group, these are the people that we can safely classify as outliers, people that are outliers probably due to response biases, including careless responding. And long string is a simple idea of measuring these straight lining tendencies that I have mentioned before. And this index just gives you away a number of identical answers in a row. So if there are 8 items in a given scale and someone uses the answer 5 for 7 times in a row, and the 8th answer is something different, then the long string, then the value of the long string index for such a person would be 7. So this is the number of identical answers in a row. So these 2 indices combined can give us an idea of the level of careless responding in our participants, and hopefully it also embrace 2 main types of careless responding, one of them being this straight lining behavior, and the second one is yielding a very incoherent, very atypical pattern of responses. Okay, and I have decided to use the cutoff thresholds methodology. So simply we identify people that have some very high levels of these 2 indices, and I filtered them out in substantial analyses that will follow. And due to some advice and evidence from the previous literature, I have decided to use two levels of cutoffs. One so-called liberal. So here we are liberal in case of putting these stamp of being careless on participants. So here we classify more people as careless, and here we filter out a larger proportion of participants than in the second cutoff, so-called conservative. So here we aren't that eager to blame someone of being careless. Okie doke. So I have also picked up some 3 groups of indicators, because of course we can try to identify who of our participants is being careless, and we can filter them out, but we have to check whether our decisions are leading to any higher data quality, or even if we are not harming the quality of the data that we have. So I have decided to use 3 groups of indicators. The first one is internal consistency measured by Cronbach's alpha. And in the first column, in the second column, actually, you see the internal consistency for the whole sample. And as you can see in the third and in the fourth column, filtering out participants identified as inattentive did not lead to any improvements of this index. So seemingly eliminating careless participants has no effect, or had no effect in this case, for the scale's internal consistency. Construct validity, here I have correlated the scales for reading, writing, numeracy, and ICT use in everyday life with another part of the PIAAC background questionnaire that measured the same use of skills, used essentially the same questions, but in the context of job. So I have, so the assumption here is that what we do in our everyday life, the usage of our skills, should be at least somewhat correlated positively with the usage of same skills in our professional life. And here you can also see that the Pearson coefficient correlations between the scores for these 4 scales did not really go up when filtering out the participants identified inattentive. And the third analysis was to compare the criterion related coefficients. Here I correlated the scores for the scales from the background questionnaire with plausible values for the PIAAC cognitive test. So I have correlated the scores for reading and writing scales with scores for PIAAC literacy test. Numeracy I have correlated with PIAAC numeracy cognitive assessment, and ICT use I have correlated with PIAAC problem solving assessment. And here we see no essential differences between the conservative screening out and the non-screened overall indices, but we see some slight improvement of the coefficients in case of liberal screening out. So if we eliminate more sizable chunk of our participants for whom we have some evidence that they might be inattentive or they have done something else during the questionnaire, we do observe some slight increase of the criterion related validity coefficients, namely that their cognitive assessment and background questionnaire that measured similar skills, similar traits, correlate a little higher than when we do not screen participants for careless responding. So, okay, conclusions. Basing on these data, we can say that careless responding seems to be a limited threat for PIAAC data, but maybe our methodology was just too liberal, and we haven't eliminated enough participants. Also, there is a interesting evidence for spurious reliability. So, in fact, the more straight liners we have in the sample, the higher the Cronbach's alpha coefficients seem to be, because straight liners just pump up this index. So sometimes when we eliminate straight liners from samples, we observe that the reliability goes down instead of going up. So this is a bit tricky part, and it makes our search for good indicators and for good indicators of careless responding, but also for good indicators of validating our decisions of screening out, makes it more tricky. So it seems that in PIAAC, at least in the cycles realized previously, careless responding is not that much of a challenge as other response biases. But we have to put some caveats here, because obviously empirical mode comparisons seem to be rare in the field, and we may benefit in future from some studies like that, and also from some experiments manipulating some important factors, some important characteristics of the face-to-face mode surveys, because we know from other research that large-scale assessments, PIAAC included, are not absolved from response biases. We observed response biases in the both parts of the assessment, meaning the non-cognitive questionnaire, but also in the cognitive test. And so, of course, we should not stop, and we should generate ideas for future studies. We should make our studies deeper, and maybe go to analyzing not only the data from participant, but also to have a look at interviewer level data. In example, some observational data, the data that interviewers give us, because they report how the contact phase of the interview went, and what was the behavior of a given participant during the interview. We can also analyze some interviewer characteristics, and we can also use some more advanced careless indices that are created, or that were created quite recently. We can also use other approaches, in example, non-threshold approaches, basing on some more fancy, some more advanced psychometric models. And there is a talk, obviously, many assessments, many surveys change to web push mode. They start to use computer assistant web interviews in their designs. So, of course, we need some mode comparison experiments to say if the threat of careless responding may potentially go up in such a setting, but we also can benefit from moving to computers, and we can use paradata analysis, log data, process data to enhance classical indices of careless responding. So it both switching to computers gives us both threats, but also more material to look for response biases in the data. Well, thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, please ask them now or write me an email afterwards. Thank you.